What's up guys, Caleb here, and today we are going to be discussing the fascinating thing that's going on with the LEGO Star Wars Boba Fett Starship. It's a very interesting thing that has been all the rage in the LEGO Star Wars community in the past couple days. So sorry Caleb, in the editing future of this thumb, I accidentally cut my thumb in a jousting match. No, I was kidding. It wasn't quite that grand, I just accidentally cut it with a knife. So it's going to be a little bit harder for me to edit later on, so sorry Caleb in the future. Anyhow, on to the actual topic of the video. Last week, the LEGO Boba Fett Starship was revealed, along with the Moff Gideon's Cruiser and the Stormtrooper transport thing, Trex Marauder thing, I think it's called. There was much confusion on why this was called Boba Fett Starship, because the in-universe name for the ship is the Slave One. That is what has been called from the very first 2000s version of Boba Fett Starship / Slave One, and they've done 5 or 6 different Slave Ones, all called the Slave One, including mini versions and just so many different LEGO versions, and they've all been called the Slave One. Also the in-universe name of the ship. Like, in the universe, it is called, in the Star Wars universe, it's called the, Slave One. Many people were confused why the 2021 Slave One was called Boba Fett Starship. It was called that on the box at LegoCon. The LEGO designer, the dude who designed it, the bald dude with the big goggly glasses, he even said that it was called Boba Fett Starship. He didn't go into detail why it was called that, but in the thing, he, went out and called it Boba Fett Starships. This left a ton of confusion in the LEGO Star Wars community on why this was called Boba Fett Starship instead of Slave One. It's been Slave One for years and years, and finally now in 2021, 20 years later, they're deciding to call it Boba Fett Starship. It doesn't make a lot of sense to us fans on why they did that. Then, a couple days later, Disney and Lucasfilm tweeted that they were permanently changing the name from Slave One. Well, they just weren't going to call it Slave One anymore. They said that they were done calling it Slave One forever. That is what Disney and Lucasfilm said, is that Slave One is an outdated name, and they're just not going to call the ship the Slave One any longer. This started an outrage in the LEGO Star Wars community. So many people got so upset over this that they were, changing the name from Boba Fett's, or Slave One, to Boba Fett's Starship. And in all seriousness, I'm gonna keep calling it the Slave One, and everybody else in the LEGO Star Wars community that I know of has been calling it Slave One, and will keep calling it the 2021 Slave One. Like, nobody's really calling it Boba Fett's Starship. They're just gonna keep calling it the Slave One. There's been multiple people who are genuinely angry at Star Wars and LEGO Disney for, removing this name, which I think is so dumb. There is so much better use of somebody's time to be doing something else than complaining about the name of a Star Wars ship. Like, I think that is just beyond dumb to go out of your way and just make a huge show of it. Like, it's really not a huge deal. People are going to keep calling it the Slave One. It's just not a big deal at all, and some people really treat it like it's a huge deal and that it should be absolutely ridiculous. It's actually a thing that people are getting to sign on this website that has 2,000 petitions already for them to rename it the Slave One. So there's this whole petition out right now of people who are absolutely outraged by this, at least 2,000 people right now, who want to call it the Slave One. I mean, I personally don't really care that much. Like, it's not a big deal either way. I'm gonna keep calling it the Slave One. It's definitely not big enough to make a whole petition for it, in my opinion. Like, that just seems ridiculous to me. This has been literally all over, Star Wars fans for 2 or 3 days now. Like, even non-LEGO fans, like Star Wars Theory, have even made videos on it. Like, it's literally everywhere right now, like, in the LEGO Star Wars community. You can't go anywhere without hearing about this, which is sort of crazy, but I mean, that's just kind of the way it works in the LEGO community, I guess. Do I think that it's a good idea of LEGO changing the name? I have not quite made up my mind fully on this yet. If you search Slave One on Google, literally almost all of the images for the first 3 minutes of scrolling are all of Boba Fett's Starship, the Slave One, and none about slavery or slaves or what Disney is trying to shut it down for. They're shutting it down, obviously, for the word slave being thrown in there. Do I think that's a good idea? I'm not sure, because really, if anybody says Slave One and you're in the Star Wars universe, your mind immediately goes to the ship and not the slaves. At least mine does, and most Star Wars fans who know the Slave One, if you say Slave One, they're gonna think of the Slave One and not slavery. I'm gonna give an example here, like an initial example. So let's just say that this is just an example, that there was a ship in the Star Wars universe called the Nazi 27. And it was called the Nazi 27. And it got super popular in the Star Wars universe. There was Lego sets made off the Nazi 27. And it was like a modern Millennium Falcon, the Nazi 27. You would go and Google Nazi 27, and all you would get was a list of Nazi 27, the starship. Does that change the fact that there's still Nazi in the name? No, it doesn't. There's still Nazi in the name. Sort of think that's the sort of same thing with the Slave One, right? Like, even though it has literally nothing to do with the slaves, it still has the word slave in it. I don't know if it's a big deal. I don't know if it's a good idea that Lego and Disney have been shutting it down, but it's just interesting to me. We're not really that many people who wanted them to stop using the name, or at least that I'm aware of. Like, it wasn't a huge thing, that this huge controversy at all. Lego just sort of, pulled it aside randomly. Like, nobody was really upset at the name before all of this, which is very interesting that Lego just now decided to pull it, right? They had 20 years where they were calling this thing Slave One, and now they're just going to completely pull the plug on that, which I think is a very interesting move on Lego's part. Is it a good idea? Obviously, a ton of Lego fans are really ticked off at this, which I do think is dumb. Like, there's much better ways of spending your time than grown people trying to, rename a Lego set made for kids, or at least that Lego set made for kids. I mean, there's better ways you could spend your time than, making this a huge deal. As I said, I'm going to keep calling it Slave One, and everybody that I know in the Lego Star Wars community has kept calling it the Slave One. So I'm pretty sure this isn't going to be a huge deal. It's probably going to die down pretty fast. It's just very interesting because it's just very popular right now and all the talk of the Lego community. So I've decided to cover it today for you guys. Know you guys' thoughts in the comments below, if it's a good or a bad idea for Lego to be renaming this, if you like their decision, and if you think the rest of the Slave Ones will be called Slave One, or if this is Boba Fett's starship forever. It's very interesting to think about. This is Seabreak Productions, sign off for now. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to stay up to date with my latest content. Also, a surprisingly low amount of people who watch my channel are actually subscribed to me, which is incredibly disappointing. Like, less than 1/4 of the people who watch my channel are not actually subscribed, which is sort of disappointing. So make sure to subscribe if you want to stay up to date with my latest content, and help me hit 100 subscribers. We're almost at 90, so 100 is coming up rather fast. Peace.